I would like to welcome you here to a guide to drawing roof plans. Now, I would ask that if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so. There are new videos posted regularly, and there's plenty also to look around from on the different playlists. So what we're going to have a look at here then is how to do roof plans. Okay, this seems to be a problem for a lot of people when they're starting out. So we're going to cover a range of different roof types and shapes of buildings. So first of all, we'll start up in the top left hand corner by here, and what we have is a basic oblong. So really we've got two options, and what we're going to do is have a little look at, first of all, just putting a line across the centre, and this would form a ridge, and what we would have here is a gable end at either end of the building. So no other sloping sides, but just two gables, and then your slope up there and slope down there with the ridge in the middle. Now if we're drawing a hipped roof, okay, what we're going to do next is have lines at 45 degrees. So I'll just do that first one nice and faint, and then do that like so. Okay, so 45 degrees is your standard for this. So that's regardless of the pitch of the roof, because as long as the pitch is the same on both sides, your hips will always be at 45 degrees on the plan. Okay, so that's the same building, but now instead of gables we've got hips at either end. Let's move on now to our L-shaped building. So again, we are going to be using the 45 degrees here. So what we're going to do is draw a line across there like that, and that basically splits that building in half. We will draw our hip on this end, go, and then we can have that come down the side over here as well. Or let's do the 45 degrees by there first. So what we now have is hipped ends either side, and these run, so this part here would be a valley, and then this part here would be a ridge tiles forming another hip by there. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Alright, so you'd have the valley on this side and the hip on that side there externally. Let's move on to a basic T shape by here. So in this example, the projecting part of the building is narrower than the main part. This enables us to, first of all, get these in position. So again, we'll just do the quickly get those hips and the ridge. Right, now what we're going to do here is hip and valley, and then on this side we'll just repeat that. Draw the valley, draw the hip, there's your valley, there's your hip, and then your ridge would go like so. So that just then fits up against the main roof. What though if your projecting element is actually wider than the main building? This creates a little bit more of a complication. So let's deal with that now. So first of all, we'll just lightly sketch the ridge across these. And we're going to consider two alternatives on this one. So let's get that by there. And first one, we'll just do this again by here, and we'll have a large hip coming through, and then we've got a large valley coming through there. Okay, and this is where we get to the tricky bit. Okay, so let's just sketch that in a little bit darker so you can see what I've done. Okay, see, because these valleys have now reached the ridge of the roof. Now you can't make the valleys carry on up there because that will just create a very silly raised wall on that side of the roof effectively. So what we do in this instance is actually fold it back the other way, like this. So what we've created there is now that roof slopes up here, and it just slopes up a bit higher in that triangular section there. So we've got the ridge coming along, and then we've got a short hip going along here, which is going up until it gets to this ridge, which is now at the highest point of the building. And then those two valleys are by there, and we've got the other hip there. So that is method number one, where basically you're making this the tallest part of the building and these bits are slightly lower. The other option you could do, which might be simpler from a roof construction point of view, but we'll see, okay, is actually to go back to using a gable, and we're going to measure the halfway point here and have a gable running down there like that, and then we can mark out that wall position on the far side of the building, and that is going to be a valley coming up to the centre point, which I've already just sketched across there. Okay, so what we have done here, we've got the ridge line there, we've got valleys there, and then we've got the ridge lines for these bits going across there, and we've used gables on all three faces there, and also a gable on that face there as well. So that's another alternative in that instance. Now we're going to have a look at a building which is essentially made out of two rectangles that intersect each other, and we're going to adjust how much of those rectangles overlap and see how that affects the roof. First of all, we have this one here. Let's draw our hips in on these far ends. And we have a ridge line coming down from that to the next hip by here, and we'll do the same on the other side over here. Now, as these hips come down, you will see that what we want to do is bring it down until it meets one of these valleys. Now it meets this one first, so that's the one we're going to connect it to. And then we'll do the same on this one by here, bring it down until it meets this valley. And then we've got a short gap between the two where we'll put a ridge, like so. So we can see that those roofs have come down. So we've got ridge of the hip coming down here, and then a straight ridge there, and then back up the hip here, while these are valleys. Now if we were to extend this building upwards by here, this will have quite a significant effect on the building. The rest of the building is the same size. So let's have a look what this does. Okay, so we'll just repeat the hip and the ridge on this side. Okay, now what we're going to do here is bring the hip down until it meets that valley. Okay, so same principle as before. It met this valley before it would meet that one, so that's where we've connected it. Now we'll do the same on this side of the building. Okay, so we've seen they've connected up. Then we will just draw a hip going down there until it meets this valley. And then we can just do a ridge line going between those 2 points there. So now we can see that the ridge is along here, a hip drops down to there, a ridge runs across, and then a hip rises back up to this ridge here, with valleys there and there. Now let's extend the building this way as well and just see how it does alter the shape of the roof a little bit more. Now, what we've got here, we'll start running our ridge along here, but what we see now is that it actually reaches the valley here before it reaches that hip. So therefore we connect it at that point. And what we need to do now is to connect it to this hip, which means we have to do a 45-degree line to see where they connect up there. So we can see that the actual ridge comes along here and then rises even higher up a new hip by there. And now we'll just do this on this side of the building. So put our hip. Again, we'll put a ridge along here, but long before we get to that hip, we get to this valley. So we can just connect those up. And then we can run that hip up here, and this has a hip coming off this point here to where they meet. And then where they meet is where we can now run a ridge between those points. So notice the difference there, how now we've got this extra raised section on this side. So the ridge ran along and it hit the valley before it hit that hip over there. So we connected it by there, and then another 45-degree line comes off to join it up there. And same on both sides, and then that just connects up with a ridge going across there. So you can see that a very similar building, just with two rectangles, can create quite different roof shapes. But now we're just going to look at one more where this is a bit more complicated and a few extra shapes are involved. So again, let's split it up into rectangles. Okay, so we can see we've got a rectangle over by here first. So let's draw our first hip on that end of the rectangle with a ridge line coming off that, and based on the principle we've just looked at, it's going to hit this valley before it hits that hip. So let's draw that valley going up to the ridge. Now 45-degree line there and a 45-degree line from this corner creates our new hip, which in turn creates a ridge coming along here. So again, we follow this ridge. It's going to reach this hip before it reaches anything else. So let's just draw that in. And from that point it has to go downwards. So we'll do a 45-degree line going down. Now this one's an interesting one because both valleys are going to actually intersect. So we are going to have a valley there and a valley there. So that sort of forms a pinnacle at that point. So let's have a look at it now from these sides. Okay, so I'll just quickly sketch that one in light. And this one to it. Okay, and we have a ridge coming off here, but we leave how far that ridge comes for a moment. Likewise, over this side of the building, we want a hip. With a ridge. But we've got this valley to take into consideration by here, so let's run that up there, and we can see that hits by there. So at that point, we need a line coming up to our ridge. And then from there, we need a 45-degree line coming down. So what we are ending up with is a junction by here, which is a little bit of a complicated junction, but it's not too bad. So we've got a valley on this side and this side, and we've got a hip coming down there and a hip coming down there, and they all meet together at that one point.